John is right, though. It's not like I actually did anything to help today. But at least I tried. Guess now I should get back to giving up on my dreams.
We all know the story of My Hero Academia as a lighthearted shonen trope story where the underdog becomes powerful along the way and meets friends to help him achieve his goals. However, today's video will shine a light on what would happen if Izuku was to have chosen another route, or you could say, was betrayed. However, before we get into all that, I quickly want to point out that 61% of you guys are actually not subscribed, and seeing as we're on the road to 100k, that potentially could help us get there. So if you haven't subscribed already, make sure you go down below and smash that red button, as well as clicking on that notification bell so you are updated on any future What If videos. That said, I do hope you guys go on to enjoy the story of what if Izuku was betrayed.
Hey Ross, sauce it up.
We start the story off after the events of UA, with Izuku at home who was just staring into his phone, in a sorry state of being upset at himself for his lackluster performance in the entrance exam. And it's at this moment when his mother Inko would rush in and hold the UA letter in her hand excitedly, as she would hand it over to Deku, who would play it alone in his room. And just before he can get his answer, we switch our perspective to a board meeting after Deku's performance in the entrance exams, with many of its members saying that his quirk could potentially be dangerous, and seeing as how much body his own quirk was able to give to his own body, he simply would not be allowed to go to the school. And with many people in this version of events actually agreeing, the verdict would be set that Izuku Midoriya would fail the entrance exam. Going back to Deku, we see him being told by All Might that he failed in the video, and it's at this moment that All Might would pretty much tell him that there's always more hero schools, and that, not to let go of his dreams, that he can always become a hero at another school. However, Izuku would look down and cry, as his mother Inko would walk in and she would begin consoling him, telling him that she's so sorry, as Izuku would be left alone in his room to sob at his own, dreams being crushed right in front of him. He would think, I guess I'll just go back to giving up on my dreams. As from here, things would go on like this for about a week, until he would finally get a message from All Might, telling him to meet him at Dagoma Beach. As he does this, he would end up seeing All Might there in a Small Might form. And then he would have a talk with All Might, where All Might would say, young Midoriya, come here. They would pretty much initiate a talk, which would lead to All Might explaining to him that with Izuku not being present at UA High and All Might not being able to train him there, it's going to be complicating things. All Might going to a new hero school is going to be complicating things when it comes to the secret of One for All, and seeing as the board meeting decided that Deku was unfit to attend UA, that he was going to be needing the quirk back, saying that he has to find a new successor, but not to worry, because even though he wasn't quite ready to become a hero, he could always do something else. But he would tell him that he would advise him not to become a hero because he might get hurt, telling Izuku that he'd always be there for him, before then patting Izuku on the shoulder and leaving him alone with his thoughts. Deku would have simply been looking down the entire time, tears in his eyes, knowing that something like this was probably going to happen. I mean, he failed All Might, he failed himself, he failed everybody. With his heart and spirits crushed, he would then proceed to just sit there as this realization just would sink into his head more and more, and he would begin to beat himself up over it. He would remain there for a couple hours before deciding to walk home, accepting his fate, thinking to himself that it's his own fault after all, that he should have worked harder. On his way home, he would take an unusual shortcut and eventually would spot a portal opening in front of him. As a man with a mask would be in front of him, he would reach his hand out as he would say, with a kind tone behind his voice, "You're the boy known as Izuku Midoriya, right?" Deku would stop and say, yeah, before sharing a brief interaction with All for One, where he would play with Deku's fragile mental state, and Deku would end up taking All For One's hand, joining the League of Villains. A brief explanation as to how this is all possible, seeing as many of you guys are probably going to be disagreeing with this. See, listen, here's my explanation as to how this story would even work. Aoyama would have been the UA traitor, as we all know if you guys have kept up with the manga, but if you haven't, then sorry, spoiler alert. But Aoyama would have been the UA traitor, and seeing as Aoyama was actually in the same area that Deku was in, he definitely would have seen the display of power shown by Izuku. After this, All For One would have done a little bit of research on him, and he would have ended up finding out that he was the successor of All Might. And so, All For One would have been planning to try to turn him towards his direction after hearing wind of the fact that Izuku failed. And after watching as All Might and Izuku had their interactions, All For One thought it perfect for this to be the moment where he could manipulate him into joining the League of Villains to prove to All Might that, to destroy All Might, to destroy him mentally and to crush his spirits, to make it easier to defeat the symbol of peace. And so, that's how all that happened. After this, All For One, as I said, would have ended up manipulating him to join the League of Villains, telling him that if he was to join, he would prove to All Might that he's wrong about him. And he would also promise Deku power and a place to call home, promising Deku everything he could ever dream of. Deku would step through the portal with All For One as he would be greeted to a room full of villains that would scare Deku. But All For One would tell Deku not to worry, that they work for him now. As he would turn towards Shigaraki and say, "You have a new brother, Tomura. Treat him well." But Shigaraki would protest to this, saying that this role is his alone, and some random nobody is not going to be taking his spot as leader. He would have a small hatred for Deku begin to build up, as Deku would feel heavily intimidated. However, the hate for All Might and the desire to prove him wrong would ultimately allow Izuku to stand his ground, which All For One would find very intriguing. Following this, Izuku would ask to go home, but All For One would tell him that he has no time to go home. This is his new home, and this will be his only priority: to become powerful, enough to show All Might just how wrong he was. Deku would look down as All For One would tell him that this world isn't made for those who are quirkless, that this world is made for those who are strong, where they only thrive, and they stomp all over everybody, playing at Deku's heartstrings and manipulating the boy with his anger and resentment towards All Might. Izuku would feel that he's being replaced by his hero, and he would slowly develop a genuine hatred for everything that All Might would stand for. Deku would train day and night with All For One in close hand-to-hand combat, and also training to use weapons such as pistols and rifles. He would also be told that if he proves himself, he could be given a quirk, and Deku would simply strive for this, as he would constantly be healed by All For One and Dr. Ujiko after countless hours of training. His training would go on like this for weeks, until the eventual day of the USJ. And the way that I picture this all going down, with Deku spiraling into this hatred of just not liking All Might and being manipulated into thinking that All Might is this horrible person, would be in the way of All For One, playing at his heartstrings. But not only that, we see a huge example of this being something that could potentially happen in the Incredibles movie. I believe it came out in 2004, and I'm pretty sure many of you guys have already seen it, but we watch as Syndrome, as a young kid who wanted to become his sidekick, after being told no and being let down by his hero, would have ended up developing a huge hatred for him. And that's kind of what I wanted to go with. With Deku feeling betrayed by his hero, that's what would have ended up pushing him over the edge. That's what would have given Deku the desire, the drive, the power to join the villains. And so, this is when everything would go on, just like it does in canon for the heroes, with them having their little their quirk apprehension tests, and ultimately leading to the heroes versus villains, and finally, the day of the USJ, where it is revealed that Deku, in the short span of time, he was changing and becoming completely unrecognizable from the person that he once was. And All For One was molding him to be his backup successor. With all this playing out on the side, Deku would see nothing as important and would pretty much not really change anything in terms of the USJ, seeing as him being there would pretty much make it so that everything else remains constant, seeing as Deku there doesn't really change much up until the point of the USJ, where things would heavily begin to change, since Deku not being there would end up changing two major moments in the anime. Number one, he isn't there to save Tsuyu and Mineta, and so he never gets involved with the fight. So that leads Aizawa to be brutally beat up until All Might's eventual arrival, where things would pretty much line up in the original canon story. Just like in the original, nobody would end up dying, some students would end up receiving a little bit of extra damage due to Deku not being there. However, they would not die or receive permanent damage, and they would be hurt pretty badly, but nothing they couldn't recover from. Shigaraki would still be forced to retrieve after watching All Might deal with Inomu. And after news of Shigaraki retreating and All Might not even dying, not even killing a single UA student, and the heroes being told that they were the ones victorious in the end, would make All For One extremely disappointed by his successor's failure. Unlike in the original, he would end up informing Izuku that he will have a chance to try his luck against All Might, and to mark the day. Deku, after hearing this news, would go to his room after bowing and telling All For One that he will never fail again. He would create a master plan with Kurogiri and also throw a knife at a poster of All Might that he has on his room with tons of writing onto it, saying kill, that he's fake, and other things of that nature on it. The poster would be half ripped with knives piercing All Might all over, and as for the following week, he would prepare the attack on the UA Sports Festival to show the world just how weak and feeble the established hero society truly is. He would plan this for weeks, as he would continuously train day after day with All For One and minions, as well as Nomu, to increase his speed, durability, and strength. And while this would be happening, the heroes would be none the wiser, and the UA traitor would be a huge part of the plan, seeing as Izuku would need to be let know of all the details concerning the layout of the school for his plan to be as effective as possible. And Deku would also request nothing more than a small army of Nomu and Kurogiri for his plan, as well as a couple of bombs, and that Aoyama will be in charge of setting in place. With all the preparations out of the way, the festival will go much as how many of you guys would expect, with Todoroki winning the race and then going on to defend his headband to secure a spot in the finals. This would eventually lead to the final match, which would be called with Bakugo and Todoroki being the ones to fight with each other, with it being a fierce battle, which Bakugo would end up coming out on top in, since Todoroki would refuse to use his fire, and so Bakugo would be declared the winner. Until suddenly, All Might, out of nowhere, underneath himself, would feel a portal teleport and drag him down to another location, as All Might would be teleported far away from the USJ, as well as a couple of other powerful pro heroes, via the assistance of a couple of All For One's teleporting Nomus to secure the success of the mission. Upon arriving, Deku would jump behind Bakugo, as he would proceed to hold him in place with his blade on his throat, as he would say, "Hey Bakugo," in his usual voice, stunning Bakugo, who would simply stutter, "Deku." But before Deku would even, finish hearing these words come from Bakugo, Deku would get angry, as thinking back to all the things that Bakugo has done to him, he would immediately let his rage overtake him, as he would cut Bakugo's throat in front of hundreds of millions of people watching the UA Sports Festival. Bakugo's body would fall flat on the floor, and he would kick him off to the side, as he would then grab the microphone, and everybody would be stunned at what just happened. Heroes would begin rushing in, saying that they need to stop this, but a couple of Nomu would get in the way, stopping a bunch of heroes from rushing in and stopping Deku. Screams would be heard all over the USJ, and Deku would begin speaking, before a flame from Endeavor would erupt, and it would be blocked by a high-end Nomu that stops him, as Deku would say, he would tap on the mic before saying, "Hello, everyone," in an ominous tone. That was kind of awkward. Let me do that again. He would say, "Hello, everyone," in an ominous tone, as heroes would rush in, and before any could get close, Deku would say, I have bombs all over set to explode with the push of a button," as he shows a remote with a red button on the top, saying that thousands of lives will be lost and countless of heroes will die if any of you step in my way. as every hero would be forced to simply stand idly by, as the heroes that would have rushed in to fight the Nomu and try to defeat Deku would have been utterly defeated, seeing as they are unable to do a thing to the Nomus, knowing that if they act, hundreds will die. He would say, "My name is Izuku Midoriya," as he would unmask himself and say, "And I was once just like many of you, a child who aspired to be just like that garbage of peace, all mine, until one day I finally realized that this world is corrupt, and so this hero society you all praise is nothing but garbage." He would go on to then say that they are all at fault, and say that in this world, those who are weak, those who are quirkless are outcasted and treated like scum. People just like him all around the world don't get the chance to become heroes, don't get the chance to become everybody in light, because in the eyes of the strong, nobody who isn't special is equal to them. And so Deku would then begin to laugh before saying, "You all claim we're all equal, but since not all of us are special, then we can't all be powerful. But I see a dream where everybody will be equal, everybody will be powerful, and then nobody will be." Before he then goes on to speak about the injustices of the world, before saying that as for All Might, where is he, huh? Where is he when you need him, eh? Silence would fill the stadium, with a couple of kids saying, "All Might!" As you could hear this from the crowd, he would say, "He wasn't there when I needed him." And then click the button, blowing up thousands of civilians and heavily injuring countless of heroes as well as other civilians, with the process of many heroes rushing in and trying to save as many people as they possibly could. Cameras around the stadium would stop rolling until Deku would ultimately pick one up and say, "I'll see you all next time," with a smile and saying, "Oh, and All Might, this one's for you," as he would then record all the chaos and destruction before everything would be completely cut and people around the world would go into chaos, as hero society from this day would never be the same. And it was all because of Izuku Midoriya. When Deku would return to All For One, he would bow before him, as All For One would have a smile on his face as he would say, "Good, good. You are worthy, my boy," with an ominous smile on his face. Following this, Deku would be granted power by All For One and told that he must use it wisely, with Deku training with said new power for a while, getting used to wielding this quirk and all of its drawbacks, along with many new members joining the League of Villains, including Stain, Dabi, Toga, Mr. Compress, Magma, and a bunch of other quirkless individuals who feel as if the League of Villains could be a place they could call home. Many people who are tired of being outcasted for not having quirks would end up joining the ranks of the villains, and so the League of Villains would rise in numbers. And this time it wouldn't be thanks to Stain, it would be thanks to one man and one man alone, Deku. The League would grow, and it would expand, as their base of operations would be moved to a brand new location, with All For One inverting tons of money into arming his new members with quirks, weaponry, and guns and such. A quick thing that I quickly just really want to talk about is just how underused guns truly are in the My Hero Academia world. We've seen the hero Snipe shoot a bunch of bullets at Shigaraki, and it definitely looked like it hurt. I mean, if somebody like Snipe was able to become such a pretty good hero that works at UA High just because he has a gunslinging quirk is able to do it, then why not petty criminals? Why can't petty criminals just get guns and just go steal banks and destroy countless of heroes? I'm pretty sure heroes aren't bulletproof, they're just stronger than the usual people, with these amazing powers that they have. However, I'm pretty sure that 50% of the pro heroes could definitely be outclassed by just the right amount of weapons. And so, I just have always wondered why guns have always been so underused. And so, I'm going to be giving you guys a hint about the next series that's going to be on the channel. Be on the lookout for What If Deku was a hitman or an assassin. That said, getting back into the story, we would focus our perspective to the hero side of things, with the media in particular shining a light on the heroes and how many people died and how one quirkless kid was able to cause so much destruction, with the heroes receiving tons of backlash, with trust in the heroes as a whole plummeting to an all-time low. UA would be permanently shut down for negligence, and many parents would choose to take their kids out of the said school. All Might would feel these repercussions the most, thinking to himself that it's all his fault. He created this monster, this new symbol of chaos. He watched the playbacks and videos of what Izuku did that day, and he saw the way that he slaughtered Bakugo in cold blood. All Might feels as if he was responsible for the death of thousands on that day, and this is something that he wasn't able to simply shake off of his mind. He would also have suspicions of All For One, thinking that he must be behind all of this, that he must have been the one who was the one responsible for taking Deku in. This would weigh heavily on All Might's mind, as he would train Mirio to control One For All, because now it's of the utmost importance, and even Mirio would be filled in on the situation regarding the previous successor of One For All. All Might would try contacting Deku, but never once received any of his calls, and Inko would have also come to find out the whereabouts of her son. She was devastated and upset that she couldn't do anything to stop it, and Inko would have been taken in by the police and questioned on her son and his affiliations. She would say that she has no idea what could have caused this, and she would explain that one day he just didn't come home after he said he was going to go train late in the day, and since then she filed a missing report after he didn't come back that day, and she started looking for him in the streets, thinking that he must have been attacked by a villain, saying that she started acting strange as soon as he began training to get into UA High School. With All Might in the room, hearing this, his suspicions would be confirmed. It definitely had something to do with him and All For One, as well as One For All. He would tell everybody in the room to quickly step out, that he needs complete privacy. And so, the police officer who was on All Might's side would tell everybody to do so, before then sighing and telling All Might that he has 5 minutes. All Might would look at Inko, he would look down at the ground and say that he's sorry, before then sighing and explaining what he believes to be the situation, as well as what happened and why he needed a successor. After Inko hears the truth, she would slap All Might with anger in her eyes as she would say, "How dare you fill my boy with these dreams and promise him to be there for him, when at the end, you chose someone else with a quirk. Maybe if you'd have done a better job as a teacher, this never would have happened." As All Might just looked down and the whole time would feel ashamed for his actions. Inko would tell All Might how much Izuku loved him, and that with what happened, even she would understand how much hatred her son has for All Might, as she would refuse to speak to All Might. And after this, we would switch our perspectives back to a bunch of Japanese citizens, as they would discuss the state of hero society as a whole, with many agreeing that it was in shambles. The heroes at this moment, with them having Inko on their side, were preparing their most elite heroes for a meeting, where their main goal would be the stopping and finding of the whereabouts of the villains on their own, using Inko as bait to lure out the leader of the League of Villains, who they presumed to be Izuku Midoriya. Many heroes would be banking on this moment, and so Inko would be reported on live television to be in the custody of police on live television, as they would say that she's on trial for raising a murderer and making it seem as if Inko would be the one dealing with the consequences of her own child. This would definitely make its way to Deku, and once he finds out, a part of him that still cares about his mom deep down would begin to resurface, and he would ask All For One if he could launch a full-scale attack to retrieve his mom and take her from the heroes. But All For One would simply put his hand over Deku's shoulder and tell him that there's no way the heroes would harm even a little hair on her head, because the heroes can't do things that they can. They have to live by a code, and that's their greatest weakness. But now, knowing that this is the case, you have to show them you won't fall for it. You have to show them that you don't care. He would then go on to remind Izuku that even if they did have the power to harm his mother, she was never there for him or even believed in his dream, that she would only hold him back, and that he was always going to be in his corner, and he was going to always trust All For One. Silence would fill the room before Deku's conviction would be solidified, and he would say, "Yes, master." He would then go back to walk away, as he would bump into Shigaraki on the way, who would get angry and try to lunge at Deku to kill him. But All For One would turn to Shigaraki as he would say, "Tomura, down. As, Shigaraki would immediately stop what he was about to do, and Deku would leave before creating a plan to let the heroes know that he isn't just going to fall into their laps and do what he says. He would gather a small army of villains in Nomu who would actually prepare to launch a full-scale attack on a hero agency, Best Jeanist. They would end up making this plan for about 1 week, and the heroes would be preparing to be ambushed by the villains, but it would never come. Deku, upon this day, would end up using one of his quirks, and so the day would arrive where they would enter, and as soon as they would enter, Best Jeanist would try to use his quirk to try to stop all of them. However, Deku would use one of his new quirks, and it would restrain Best Jeanist, as well as a couple of other unfortunate heroes who were dumb enough to be ensnared by Izuku. Keep in mind, after Izuku's success with the plan of, pretty much causing complete chaos with the sports festival, All For One would have definitely heavily compensated Deku for that by granting him power that Deku would have had to train with and get accustomed to after all this time. So, Deku would use his new acquired quirk to take down Best Jeanist, as well as a couple of other unfortunate heroes who were dumb enough to be ensnared by Izuku. His forces would move in and proceed to light the place up, as countless of heroes would lose their life with their leader unable to do a thing, and Deku would utterly bring the agency down to its knees, with no heroes being able to oppose his army of Nomus and armed villains who just shot at heroes, killing them upon contact. After all was said and done, Izuku would kill Best Jeanist before crucifying him and writing "Keep her" on the wall with the blood of the heroes that he would have killed. This would be done in the span of just 3 minutes, not giving any heroes around the world the chance to help or arrive. And so, Izuku would have devastated another of Japan's top tier heroes and brought fear into their eyes of the media and other heroes alike. Many lower tier heroes, after finding out about these events via news outlets and seeing the devastation caused by Izuku, would quit, being terrified of Deku. And Deku would bring many hero agency down to their knees, with them tightening security and getting brand new measures of trying to defend against the quirks that Deku and his army have. As All Might, at this point, would be starting to wish that he would have made the school board change his mind. Every day this thought would go through his head, that maybe, just maybe, if he would have convinced them, all this could have been avoided. That it was his fault. That it was his fault that all this was going down. But what could he do? That's nothing more than a what if. After this, Izuku would receive praise from all for one, as he would go on to show more and more favoritism towards Deku, leaving Shigaraki feeling like he's no more than second fiddle. And with that, he would decide that he hates this place and that Izuku took everything from him. And so, feeling like he lost everything here, he would decide to flip Deku's world on its head by leaving the League of Villains and turning himself into the police, giving them the location of their base of operations. And with this comes a bunch of changes to the story. All For One and Izuku alike would have always had the element of surprise on the heroes, and that's what gave them the advantage. But with Shigaraki turning himself in, this would change the tide of the battle a lot, because now the heroes have time to prepare a full-scale attack, similar to what they would have done in the manga in regards to the war arc, where many insane battles would have gone down. So as I said, the heroes would question and interrogate Shigaraki, trying to find out if he's truly telling the truth, and tell him that they can bring Izuku in, but he needs to cooperate. Shigaraki would make a bunch of demands in order for him to leak out more and more information, and he would end up getting a bunch of luxuries in his jail cell, also asking to be there present for the battle, but they would deny the last request, saying that he could not be trusted anywhere near the battlefield. With All Might asking, what exactly led Shigaraki to becoming a villain? Shigaraki would tell them that it's none of their business, as the heroes just have to accept this and prepare a full-scale attack on the villains. The villains would be blissfully unaware of this at first, but they would realize with Shigaraki gone, they would have to be on guard, because who knows what he could be doing. He might be trying to start his own rebellion, he might be telling the heroes their whereabouts, he might have even just left and not said a word. So they have to be ready for anything. But All For One would tell Izuku not to worry, seeing as he took Shigaraki's quirk long ago and simply gave him a copy of it. So Shigaraki won't be the slightest bit of a problem. Deku would smile as he would tell All For One that they'll be ready for anything, and Deku would prepare many of his troops until eventually the day would come where the heroes would knock on the door saying, "Pizza delivery!" before All Might and Mirio would bust in and begin demolishing countless villains. Heroes and villains alike would engage in an all-out war with many casualties on the hero side of things, seeing as they have hundreds of Nomus and high-end ones at that. With guns and machinery all over the place, Mirio would be one of the only ones capable of handling so many powerful Nomus. Using his newly acquired 40% of One For All, with the extra quirks it's provided, he's able to dodge and evade countless of villains, with hundreds of other pro heroes rushing in, trying their best to defeat the League of Villains. But as time would pass, it would become painfully clear that the heroes, even with the help of the police, would be overwhelmed by the sheer power of the villains, displaying themselves as, very, very formidable. Mirio and All Might would practically be the ones doing all of the work, and eventually after defeating many villains, they would end up getting closer and closer to Izuku and All For One's location, as heroes would stay back and engage with battles against the core members of the League of Villains like Toga, Stain, Dabi, Twice, Mr. Compress, Magma, and others alike. They would face the top 10 pro heroes, as well as Nejiri and Tamaki, their senseis, and even Sir Nade would be present, taking care of countless of villains using his future sight to aid in the battle. And All For One and Deku would be having a blast, with Deku saying that Sir Nade's quirk might be very useful in the future, with All For One saying it definitely would be. About 10 minutes later, both Mirio and All Might would bust into the room and stand before Izuku and All For One, who would simply smile and say, "Glad you could join us, Toshinori." Deku would eye Mirio up and down before saying, "So, All Might, this is who I was replaced with? What a joke. You filled my head with dreams only to crush them. But it's funny because now I'll get to crush you and make you watch as I kill your very own successor." Mirio would get mad and it would show in his face, saying that he can't believe he was chosen as a candidate, ever. Deku would stay quiet as All For One would put his hand up and say to All Might, "I assume you met Shigaraki, or should I say, Tomura, the grandson of your master, Nana Shimura." As All Might would realize this, his drive would slowly die slowly, as he would think to himself that there's no way. But All For One would laugh before saying that it's your fault Tomura ended up the way he was, and Deku the way that he currently is, that All Might is a failure. All Might, after hearing these words come out of the mouth of All For One, would fall into a deep state of despair as he would say, No, it's not true. And Mirio would get angry at this, before he would then rush at All For One's direction, but would be sent back flying by an attack from Deku, as it would seem to be a sludge-like substance, a black goo that rushed at Mirio at incredible speeds. And he would say, "Don't worry about your fight with him. Your fight's with me," as he would rush at Mirio with a knife in hand, as Mirio would go in to throw a devastatingly hard punch at Deku, which would splatter Deku's body on the wall, before reforming and saying, "Looks like brute force won't work either, eh, brother?" Mirio would be shocked, as he would leave himself open, as Deku would watch Mirio and think, as Mirio would be thinking up of ways to damage Deku, but he would simply say that his fun is over, before Deku would turn towards the direction of All Might and say that this is all his fault. He put him there in this position, and it's because of him that his successor will die. Deku would look to Mirio before saying, "What's the difference between me and you?" Mirio would say, "You're a villain," before stopping suddenly in his attack. And Deku would say, "Checkmate. But that's not it. You were born special. I wasn't. And you were picked over me." He would rush at Mirio's direction, who at this point couldn't move since he's under mind control. Yep. His second quirk is mind control. And his other quirk is sludge manipulation, like the sludge villain but more advanced version. And Shinsu's quirk would have been taken from him during the sports festival by All For One himself, after seeing what it was capable of during said festival. That said, Deku with no hesitation or remorse would go on to kill Mirio in cold blood, as All Might would be forced to watch since he's facing All For One and be completely rendered useless. Mirio would fall in battle as Deku would kill him in cold blood, leaving All Might to be enraged and rushing at All For One as he hits him away and rushes back towards Izuku, who would simply say, "Why didn't you pick me?" before being splattered by All Might with tears and rage in his eyes. He would then be hit as he would be splattered against all walls. He would slowly reform, only to see All Might on the floor, cradling Mirio, as Deku would stand atop of him, saying that he's pathetic, that All Might was just like the rest of them, and deserved to die. He would look at him before saying, "You picked that scum over me. You filled me with ideas of becoming your successor. You told me I could do it. You told me no matter what, you'd be there to help me. Why, All Might? Why did you give up on me? Why'd you betray me? It should have been my quirk. That should have been my power. That was mine." All Might would look down before simply saying, "I'm sorry, Izuku. I failed you. I failed Tomura. I failed Mirio. And I failed Nana. She would be rolling around in her grave if she could see me in this state," before he would then look at Izuku and say that he wishes things could have been different. But Deku would look at him as he would smile, and suddenly Deku would look at All Might as he would think to himself that he's just pathetic, as he would have a tear come from the top of his eye, and he would then scream, "Die!" before rushing down at All Might and killing him. This is when Deku would smile, as then suddenly, All For One would hold Deku by the throat as he would rip both quirks from Deku's body, with Deku uttering, "What? Why?" As All For One would smile and say, "I need a vessel," before knocking him out and transferring his consciousness into Deku, utterly betraying Deku. And that wraps up the ending to What If Deku Was Betrayed. It's funny, because the entire story, Deku was under the premise of thinking that All Might was the one who let him down, but in reality, he was oblivious to the fact that All For One was the one who had his worst interest in mind, and he only was looking out for himself. The entire time, Deku was betrayed, but not by the person that he had thought to be his downfall. Instead, it was All For One. What did you guys think of today's story? This one didn't end in a positive light just because of the way that everything was built during the story earlier on. I couldn't just make Deku go back to the light side because at this point Deku was far gone and the whole theme of the story was betray Deku. So I find it both thematically perfect for the story to end this way and also just a good ending overall. It's not just countless destruction, and all of this happened with purpose. Everything fell into place, kind of like dominoes. Following this, many of you guys are probably going to be really curious to what happens. Obviously, we know that the villains would have ended up winning this encounter, seeing as after this All For One stepped into the battle, and with the fact that the heroes were already on the losing side, and then lost their two aces in the holes of Mirio and All Might, the battle was an easy one. After this, months would go by, and All For One would have ended up having his full consciousness transferred into Izuku by Dr. Ujiko, with eventually Stars and Stripes arriving, leading to a very, very intense battle, which All For One would ultimately be the victor of. That is how I see the full scenario of What If Deku Was Betrayed playing out. If you guys enjoyed any part of this story, then please make sure to go down below, smash that like button, as well as let me know what your guys' take of this story would have been, and also letting me know what your favorite part of the video was, as well as turning on those post notifications to be informed of any future uploads. That said, thank you guys so much for 50k. I really appreciate it, and I just want all you guys to know that this would not be possible without every single one of you guys. That said though, it's been your boy Zedder. I love each and every single one of you guys, and expect a banger coming from my channel very soon. That one that one week but yeah. Bye guys.